So I'm Amarachandra, if we haven't met, and we're starting a new series this week, leading up to the end of the year, on creative symbols in Buddhism. And I'm doing the first talk, and I wanted to do a talk with slides, looking at the image of the Buddha. So thinking about the image of the Buddha, particularly in the 5 Buddha Mandala. And then what does that tell us about enlightenment? What does that tell us about who the Buddha is and what the qualities are of enlightenment? So it's not just abstract. It's like, oh, I can cultivate those qualities too. Yeah. So I've called it the Mandala, an array of enlightened qualities. And we have this beautiful, I put this beautiful mandala here. And I'm just going to, it's so nice to have a really big projector actually, usually on this tiny screen. So, yes, excellent. We have the white Buddha Vairochana right at the center of this mandala. And then we have the blue Buddha in the east, going round to the yellow Buddha of the south, the green Buddha of the north, and the red Buddha. Oh no, there's the that way. The red Buddha of the west. Oh yeah, sorry. Oh, interesting. I didn't look very. So this is coloured blue, but the figure is white. This is coloured yellow, and the figure is blue. Anyhow, I'm going with blue, yellow, green, and red, and then the white Buddha at the centre. So this part, this circle here, is the circle that gives its name to the mandala. And then around the mandala holds what's most precious at the center. So at the center are the Buddhas. And then everything around it is part of the that sort of explosion of play of symbols and other things like that sort of adorn the mandala along with the 5 Buddhas. And in this particular mandala, they started off as aids to meditation and ritual. And so we've got the Buddha right in the center at the top, and then we've got some Tibetan masters at each side. So you might be down here, a group of monks down here, and here practicing away. They're doing the visualization, bringing this mandala to life in their minds.
Chandra,
Yes.
stand on this side because you're blocking part of the image.
Thank you. Then I'll be blocking it for other people. Okay, I'll stand back a bit. I'll stand back. I'll kneel. Great. Can you hear me? Is that okay if I kneel? If I stand right up there? Yeah. So I just wanted to start with this image of the Buddha to start with. So we have the Buddha, who is a historical person. And his teachings were remembered and recited, and they were preserved. And key life events were remembered. His biography emerged over time, and key sites of his life became really, really important. So that's over time. We've got the historical person of the Buddha right at the center of Buddhism, really. And this is a lovely image by a contemporary artist of the Buddha and his companion, his friend Ananda, and it really sort of shows them on the dusty roads of India, friends together in this life. So we've got the Buddha at the center of things. And then, of course, the Buddha died, and these beautiful architectural stupas, reliquaries really, were built at pilgrimage sites. So then people started to have practices of coming to the pilgrimage sites to be near the relics of the Buddha. And then monasteries were established a few hundred years later around them. So, you know, it's a bit like a medieval cathedral. They had surgeries and healing and all sorts of things around it. But architectural structures need decoration, don't they? You know, they start off simple and then they become more and more elaborate, but they're also vehicles for teaching and reflecting. So for the mostly illiterate population, they tell they can tell the key events and the life story of the Buddha, as well as being a holy site. So you're getting an education when you're going to these pilgrimage sites. And of course, over time, the life story of the Buddha is emerging. The historical Buddha is becoming sort of more distant from people. And at the same time, the biography, the events of the Buddha's life start to be put in place, and perhaps some of them become a bit larger than life, you know, and that's fine. The stories, the myths, the legends, the sort of the archetypal significance of some of those events just make a really rich archive for us to sort of connect with and sort of think about the qualities of the Buddha, the historical Buddha. So this is Sanchi Stupa in India. And yeah, the key events of the Buddha's life, his birth, he left home, leaving home to follow his spiritual quest, his enlightenment. He taught for more than 40 years, which is extraordinary. And then his death or parinirvana. And so the stupas were covered in these events. And here's a panel, which is in the British Museum. It's a decent size, maybe a metre and a half, bit less. You can see there's a Bodhi tree, and there's a throne, and there are some footprints down the bottom. And we've got some devotees at the side with their hands they're sort of kneeling, and their hands are sort of pressed in prayer or reverence, really, there. And so originally, the image of the Buddha, the human image of the Buddha wasn't shown. So the image, the symbol of the tree, the symbol of the footprints, the symbol of the throne and the parasol, all indicated the presence of the Buddha, but the image of the Buddha wasn't shown, and that's a whole different talk. I won't go into it, but there wasn't any sort of teaching to say you shouldn't show the image of the Buddha. It's just that at that stage it wasn't shown, and maybe there is something about the quality of the Buddha's death, his death and his passing away was significant, because what the teaching was that he was escaping from this endless cycle of birth and death, this endless cycle, and the Buddha saw through what kept us hooked into an endless cycle of becoming. We might relate to it as an endless cycle of becoming rather than rebirth and rebecoming. This endless cycle of becoming was that at the core of him, at the core of all of us, there isn't a fixed sense, a fixed self. There's this creation of a sort of identity and an ego identity, but actually at the center of things, there was no fixed self. So that then when he passed away, that was that. So maybe there's something in not showing the figure of the Buddha that was completely in tune with his enlightenment experience, and that teaching following on. It's like, don't try and grasp the Buddha after his enlightenment. Something's really shifted, something profound has shifted. He can't be grasped, but the symbols can be there, and you can sort of still relate to the Buddha through those symbols. But there were these key events in his life, and then they started. Things did start to shift. New cultures came into India, and they didn't have such a problem with showing the figure of the Buddha. So then around the stupa, we started to get these images of the Buddha as a human figure. And narratives of the Buddha's life started to develop. And so you could walk around the stupa going from birth, or going from his mother's dream, really, and going right through his whole life. And then this is an event in the Buddha's life, which I'm sure many of you can identify. So there's the Buddha in the center, and there are 5 shaven-headed figures around him. And he's got this wheel in his hand, and there are 2 deer. So it's the Buddha rolling the wheel of the Dharma. So teaching his 5 friends, sharing with them his enlightenment experience, and they get it. They're like, oh, we get it. And so they become disciples of the Buddha. And then we've got this Vajrapani sort of earth, representing power, really, maybe the earth guarding the Buddha as well. So you get these narrative images of the Buddha, and sort of with his biography. But then over time, things start to change a bit more. So we have images of the Buddha that are now not just about him as the human being, but as a Buddha that is always teaching. So a Buddha that can be accessed. So we're moving into a sense of a sense of the Buddha that is always teaching. So this is the Buddha at the center of the mandala. And I guess I'm showing you some of these images because there are so many figures of the Buddha, and sometimes people just don't know what they're looking at, and they're thinking, what Buddha is this, and what's the Buddha doing? So this image is at the British Museum again, and the Buddha's doing this hand gesture, which is a bit like turning the wheel. So turning the wheel of the Dharma. But it's also a bit like his teaching as well. It's got a little point to make. So there's these 2 sort of things together, turning the wheel of the Dharma, but also just gesturing as if he's giving you a fine point of Dharma that he thinks you could just handle. You can get it. So, so he's sitting, now he's got a halo around him. You can see his feet are placed on a lotus. So now we're kind of out of time, aren't we? We're out of time. So this is the Buddha that is no longer just the human Buddha. It's the Buddha that we can be in contact with. And it represents Buddhahood as well. Buddhahood is an ideal that we can all, like this great sort of energy or force in the universe. We can all gain enlightenment. So it represents the possibility of enlightenment for all beings, really, for all of us. And I've put in, well, here we go. So here is, so when the Buddha then is at the center of the mandala, we're going to call it the 5 Buddha mandala, he is Vairochana. So he is this sort of white Buddha, and you can see here, he's holding the wheel. He's always teaching, he's holding the wheel. So this is a contemporary image as well. And we've got the center of the mandala, or the center of the universe, really, the center of everything, is this ideal of being able to understand the Dharma, understand the Buddha's teachings, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever's happening. It's always there, always present. So in the mandala, we've got the Buddha he's white, and his wisdom is this wisdom of the sort of the spacious mind, the great spacious mind, the sort of meditation that sort of opens up to sort of other dimensions. And he holds this sort of beautiful wheel, and he's got the sun and the moon in the sky at the same time. So we definitely know we are out of time.
Mm.
And so then sometimes you see these images of the Buddha, teaching, or sometimes they're a bit more esoteric. He's holding one finger. And it sort of represents this idea of being able to sort of contact the Buddha's teaching at any time. And again, you can see there's a sort of more of a cosmic aspect to things here. We've got different sort of figures around the Buddha. We've got a whole line of Buddhas here under parasols. A sort of more cosmic kind of aspect of Buddhism is being brought forward. Yeah, so it's just a way to think about Buddhism, to think about the Buddha, the Dharma, and we're 2,600 years on from the Buddha, and we're still benefiting from the Buddha's teachings. So this is a sort of representation of that. And here's another one. This is the Tibetan painted image of the Buddha teaching. And again, there's a sort of great crowd of people, but the Buddha is right at the center of this. And then, this here again, we've got the Buddha teaching. This is at Ellora Caves in India. And he's got these two figures flanking him now. So now we're sort of moving to sort of expanding out this idea of the Buddha, and including with the wisdom of the Buddha's teachings, also qualities of enlightenment are compassion and energy. So these are ways to represent compassion and energy. So these two figures, one of them holds a lotus, symbol of compassion, and one of them holds a diamond thunderbolt, the Vajra, symbol of energy. So this is about the 6th century, let's say. And that goes on. So you get these triads, and here this is a very lovely, this is a 10th century image. So you've got the Buddha in the center, and you've got the Vajra holder, Vajrapani in blue on one side, and then Padmapani on the other side. So this represents wisdom, compassion, and energy. And this goes on, continues on in sort of Buddhist images. These are the three main attributes of a Buddha, of us really, as we get, as you know, this is what we're aiming for really. This idea of understanding, of knowledge, of completeness in that way, of compassion. So that's the other side. If you really understand something, then compassion is its natural companion, really. Wisdom brings in the heart. And then all the energy that is released when we're not holding on to our petty worries, when we're not trying to sort of guard our egos and protect ourselves. So I love that that's a quality, actually. That's a quality of the Buddha. Energy is released. And I've just done a little close up here. I've never seen this image, but I really love it. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. You can see here the Buddha's kind of still the Buddha, isn't he? He's still in his monastic robes. But you've got these sort of more these bodhisattvas on each side. So now we're going to have a little look at first off this figure in blue, so Vajrapani, and that's the Vajra holder, and then the lotus holder, because this is the sort of start of the mandala really with these three figures. And the Vajra holder, Vajrapani, in the 5 Buddha mandala, sort of he sits down and he's got the Vajra and he becomes imperturbable. So his quality is that he's unshakable. The Vajra represents reality. I just think, oh, if you can hold on to that, if you're holding on to that, nothing shakes you. And there's something about the blue color, which I also really love. There's something very, very deep, unfathomable about that blue. So the Vajra holder then is in the east, and he's known as Akshobhya, the unshakable, the imperturbable. And he has the special quality of overcoming hatred. Yeah, but he has this very particular gesture of touching the earth. And if anyone's ever been to our retreat center, Vajrasana, which is just about an hour away, there's this beautiful pond, and it has an Akshobhya Buddha touching the earth and holding the golden Vajra. And this gesture of touching the earth goes right back to the heart of the Buddha's story. So this is an image of the Buddha, and he is touching the earth. And I know many of you will know what this is about, but I'm going to tell the story anyway. So let me just stop my legs falling asleep. Oh yeah. So the Buddha has been practicing austerities, not eating, doing really extreme practices. And he goes through, he's emaciated, really, really weak. He goes to get a drink from the river. He falls in. And in that moment, he realizes that he doesn't, not sure he has the strength to get himself out of the river. So he climbs onto the banks, he makes it out, and he thinks, this is ridiculous. I could die before I gain enlightenment. This path of really mortifying the flesh and being really, really harsh, not eating, doing other sorts of practices of mortification, this is not going to release the mind. That's what the practices were about, releasing the mind. I need to do something that is kinder, that isn't so extreme. And a young woman brings him a bowl of food, some rice pudding or something, and he takes some of the rice pudding, and he can instantly feel the nourishment just sort of flooding into his body, and he knows this is the, that this is the right thing to do. And his 5 friends who are practicing with him leave. They go, oh, you've gone soft. We're going to leave you. But the Buddha was very determined, and he thought, right, I've got something here. I'm going to look after my body. There's some, I'm going to take some simple nourishment. And he remembered a time in his youth when he'd been very concentrated in meditation. Through just simple pleasures of being outside and watching the ploughing of a field. And remembering something simple and pleasant and concentrated, he thought, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to practice meditation, but with this sort of, with more kindness and awareness in that way. So he sits down under the great Bodhi tree, finds a good spot, and he says, right, I'm going to sit here. I've got something. I'm going to pursue this. The stories tell us, he says, I'm going to gain enlightenment or bust. So he sits down, and he gets very, very deeply concentrated, and he is working on his mind. He's already been meditating for a long, long time. He's sort of not meditating like you or I. He's much further along, and so the mythological story is that these armies come along, and you can see there's a guy up in the top there. They're going to throw a boulder at him. There's dogs. There's monkeys. Who knows what's going to happen? They're all they've got swords. And this is the last vestiges kind of of disturbing emotions like that, leaving his mind, sort of hatreds, attacking his minds. And then in his mind, these dancing girls come along. And he's like, stay steady. And that's the sort of, he's not interested in the dancing girls. They hold no interest to him. And that's the sort of I sort of think of that sort of lusty, greedy sort of part of our sort of wishing to, of our sort of our being, that sort of subsides. And then he has a moment and he thinks to himself, well, I don't know, he doesn't really think to himself. This is just our sort of our way of saying it, isn't it? Because he's sort of beyond thought. But there's something about on the threshold of enlightenment. And maybe is something a bit human in there that sort of says, who am I? Who am I to sit here? And can I really do this and break through? And there's a sort of, you could sort of look at it as a bit of a sort of shake of confidence. And in that moment, he reaches down with his hand and he touches the earth. And we can't see it here, but the earth goddess rises up, the earth who has witnessed his life over centuries, over lifetime. And the earth goddess says to him, I have seen you. And I can attest that you deserve to be here. You are right to engage to gain enlightenment. Don't have any hesitation. So it's this moment of touching down in this story that is really, really significant. And at that moment, sort of actually, she wrings her hair, and all this water comes from her hair, and the great armies, the dancing girls. I don't know how that Roman soldier got in there, but they all disappear. And you can see them tumbling down. They all just get washed away. And that's the breakthrough moment. That's the sort of the moment where something lets go and the enlightened mind arises. So this is the moment of enlightenment. And this touching down is such a common way to depict the Buddha. This is a really beautiful image. I'm going to move on. So you see a lot of times the Buddha touching down on the earth. And that's what it references. It references that moment of enlightenment, that sort of touching the confidence that he deserves to be here. And I think of this this touching down, and I use it myself. And sometimes I might say to people, you know, what are you going to touch down on? What can you touch down on in your own experience that can give you confidence, that you know already? You're not looking outside yourself. What can you touch down on that you know already that you can have confidence in? So that's what that gesture represents. So again and again and again, you see this image of touching down. The big Buddha at Vajrasana, he touches down, doesn't he? He touches down onto the earth. So that's what it represents. And in that moment, I guess in a way, with all those armies coming, the Buddha is unshakable. He is imperturbable. He will sit there to gain enlightenment. So that's what this image of Akshobhya Buddha is trying to show us. It's an aspect of an enlightened mind that can hold the Vajra, can grasp reality. And well, if you can do that, you can be with anything. You can be with anything. So it's the determination of the enlightened mind, the imperturbability. It will not be shaken. So that's the Buddha of the East, and the time of this Buddha is the sort of as dawn. And then across in the West, on the other side, we have the beautiful red Buddha, Amitabha. And Amitabha's wisdom is compassion. He overcomes greed, this sort of lust for life in a way. You can have a good lust for life as well. He's deep, deep red, and he sits in meditation. and his symbol is the lotus flower. And Amitabha becomes very, very important in Japanese Buddhism and Chinese Buddhism, whole schools of Buddhism sort of around the sort of devotion to Amitabha. But again, it's this image, it starts with the image of the Buddha. So here we have this beautiful, which is probably, like I say, a 1st or 2nd century image of the Buddha here, from northern Pakistan, around there. This beautiful Tibetan image of the deep red Buddha meditating away. And then there's another Tibetan image of the Buddha stroke Amitabha in deep meditation. So we think of the Buddha meditating, of course we do. So this quality of meditation is also associated with the quality of compassion. So there's a stillness to the Buddha in meditation, isn't there? There's a stillness. And in that, I guess, there's a sort of a letting go of being over-identified with self, so that there can be more sort of other regarding. And Amitabha's wisdom is to really see the, no, is he, oh God, I've forgotten where I'm going. Amitabha is particulars, no, or wisdom of sameness, or the wisdom of, oh God, discriminating wisdom. Yeah, so he sees the particulars. So I just had a moment. He sees the particulars of, that's it, yes. So he sees the particulars so that compassion goes out to what is needed in that moment. So, you know, I know for myself, when my meditation practice is going well, I step out into the world with more compassion. I step out into the world to be able to see and be with the particulars of what's going on, of who I meet and what situations are sort of arising in my day, and not be so reactive. So meditation helps us be in the world with more compassion, to be able to meet the individual situations that we're sort of meeting. So the Buddha, the Buddha of the West, the red Buddha. And so then we have the Buddha of the South. So we've done the center, we've done Amarachandra in the center, and we've done the Vajra holder in the east, the lotus holder in the west. And now we're going down south to the beautiful Buddha Ratnasambhava. So you don't see this as an image of the Buddha very often. So Ratnasambhava has his hand outstretched with the palm out, and he represents our great generosity, actually. This sort of image of what can you give? And his symbol is the jewel. So he has all these riches and he just wants to give it away. He just wants to not hold on to anything. The more he gives, look at these flowers, the more riches he has. So he's the wisdom of equality. So Amitabha sees the particulars in a situation, but Ratnasambhava sees things without discrimination. There's a sort of a great love in there that is about understanding the equality of things, the understanding who we all are. There's a sort of aspect of that we are all different and we need different things. And we're all human beings. We probably need a lot of the same things. So it's this aspect of the enlightened mind, of enlightenment, that is about generosity and giving. So the wisdom that he has is the wisdom of equality, but he overcomes pride. So pride is the self-centeredness, isn't it, at the sort of center of everything. And I know for myself, when I find it hard to give, I'm really worried often about myself. Will I have enough if I give?
Will I be made a fool of if I give? What happens to me if I give? So it's a great practice in Buddhism. It's great to explore what I think is me and mine, and what I think I can share or be in communication with the rest of the world. So we talk a lot about generosity at the Buddhist Center, but it is a core Buddhist practice. And when we're feeling completely low and don't have, just feel sort of really depleted in ourselves and feel like we don't have anything to offer the world, the practice is to give something, give a smile, give your seat on the bus, give something, and then you're sort of back in connection with the world, back in relationship. So this practice of giving is about our connection with the world and sort of taking us perhaps a little bit out of the center of everything. And there aren't many images of Ratnasambhava, but sometimes you do get whole stupas with all the Buddhas around the Mandala, and this is one in Orissa. And then we'll jump to the north, and then here we have the green Buddha, the very mysterious green Buddha, Amoghasiddhi. And his symbol is the double Vajra. I mean, that is a symbol, and he's all about fearlessness. So this gesture, which again is very common in, you see it with Buddhas. This Buddha over here has got a gesture of fearlessness and also of generosity. This gesture of fearlessness, go forward, it'll be all right. So there are lots of images of the Buddha with this hand up in this gesture of fearlessness, Abhaya Mudra. So when you see these images of the Buddha, it really is this sense of there's nothing to fear. Or, with the sort of sense of all of the qualities of the mandala, we can move forward. So this is one of the qualities of the Buddha. This is one of the qualities of the enlightened mind. And I guess I definitely have got more fearless as I have practiced Buddhism more and more. Yeah. Why hold back? Can I be more fearless in my life? Yeah, so these different Buddha images from different places, from central India, from northern Pakistan. I think that it's perhaps even from China. These sort of lovely images with this sort of gesture of fearlessness right at the heart, coming from the heart, fearlessness as a quality of enlightenment. So these 5 Buddhas are sometimes carved into rock faces here. You can see Vairochana in the center. They're doing their different gestures. Sometimes they're carved into in this grid here in the caves again at Ellora. Ways to think about it. A little bit of a close-up here. You can sort of see them a bit more. And then sometimes they're arrayed in these mandalas, which at the heart has the 5 Buddhas, and then these sort of great circles of vajras and lotuses and fire, and sort of these sort of cosmic view of the world in this mandala here. It's a bit blurry, sorry about that. But they're also very simply sort of arranged with the quality of the Buddha right at the center, the sort of the Buddha, the Dharma represented by Vairochana, sort of great spaciousness, with the Buddha of the East, the imperturbable quality of enlightenment, actually. And even as our minds, as we sort of move into our practice, how can we be steadier? I want my mind to be steadier, actually. I want to be steadier in my life, not so sort of blown around. The yellow Buddha of generosity, of not being the center of the universe, and sort of expanding my awareness to sort of have a bigger view of the world. the quality of compassion and love in the red Buddha of the West. Meditation practice giving us the resources to move out into the world with more heart. And then the green Buddha, that sense of going out into the world with more heart and fearlessness. We're not so separate then. I think there's a quality of that, sort of with all these qualities. We're not so separate. We're more in communication. We're more able to be with the people who come along, the circumstances that come along. These are the sort of qualities of the Buddha, the qualities of the enlightened mind. So this is our first symbol, the 5 Buddha Mandala, in our series on Tantric symbols. They're just ways to explore enlightenment, really, explore practice. So I hope that's given you a bit of a taste, a bit of a taste for the 5 Buddha Mandala and the qualities of enlightenment.